Welcome to the Dental and Mental Podcast.
We are going to be talking to you about the business and the mindset of dentistry.
Welcome to part 4 of the Dental and Mental Podcast.
Yes, we are doing a 4-part series on the different questions that we think are the main questions to be asking yourself around life.
Yeah, these are truly the 4 most influential questions. I can't think of a more influential question than these 4. And the questions that everyone should be asking. So, our 4th question. It's the one that kind of ties it all together, and it's typically one that comes after the first 3 have been answered. And it is kind of what's it all for? What are you living for? What's the point? So, what's the point to life, babe?
What's the point to life? Well, I think this question is obviously very personal to each person. And for me, I think the answer is for you, for our children, for the legacy of those children and their kids and whatever, generations moving forward. And for God, am I doing a service to my maker? Mm-hmm. What is the account that I will be held to? Do I get to live a life well done and say it mattered? Or is it kind of like,
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, for me, I'm very much in agreement with you. And I take that kind of added approach of really answering for my entire family. There's a responsibility and leadership position that I hold that's unique in our family where, I feel sobriety around caring for and leading each and every one of you on that front. I was at one point in time we were talking about my tattoo on the podcast in June and all of that, right? But the story is actually going to be we'll do a podcast at some point in time that's like the tat, But it's interesting because as I picked these characters, I started to realize that it very much was my perception of the purpose of life. And I don't think that I meant to do that. That wasn't a conscious thought. But it is what I picked. And so it's really kind of 4 main characters in the Bible that very much speak to who I want to be, like the kind of man I want to be. So whether it's in relationships or it's in business or it's where you live, what you do, who are you going to be in each of those areas and how will you lead? And that I think is a question that every person has to ask themselves, 100%. So we've noticed something interesting. When you and I are working with people, oftentimes this question is not the first one that gets asked. In fact, even on podcasts and in movies and everywhere else, it's not the first thing that people ask. When you're young, it's actually not at all like even on like the radar for most people. You're kind of thinking like, how do I make enough money to get out of debt? Or how do I afford the life that I want? Or how do I take care of the kids that I have? How am I going to ...
Well, we're kept so busy that these questions are a luxury to be able to play around with.
Yeah.
Right. We're kept so busy. And even if we're not kept busy doing things that are necessary, we have plenty of other distractions, right? You can scroll, you can shop, you can eat, you can indulge in whatever vices you want. So there are so many different things that you can do other than think.
Yeah.
And I think it's when you get to the place where you're tired of doing all those other things that you really start to sit with, what is any of this for? What does it matter?
It's sort of the ultimate iteration, isn't it? We've talked a lot about that, about these kind of error corrections as you go through life. And if you're doing it right, you're going to make a lot of mistakes because you're trying things, but you're honing in. It's not just haphazard. You're creating a method to the way that you're going to grow as an individual and as a leader and as a practitioner. There's a lot to be said for the iterations on perhaps a more of a metaphysical or spiritual level of like, what's it all for? You kind of make the money and you create the time and you try this and you try that. And sometimes I think that people come to the place of like, that's not the answer. And that wasn't the answer. And that's not the answer. So what is it? And you have to have gone through those iterations to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think thinking is really uncomfortable as well. Like to think about this question is actually really uncomfortable.
Why?
So because your brain really does start to hurt. Like
physically, yeah.
Yeah, you start to get wrapped up in this. I'm in, so we homeschool our kids. You know this, but I'm telling the people. We homeschool our kids, and we have a 16-year-old son, and he was doing a lot of philosophy this year. So he was going through Socrates, and I am also in a book club with the other moms.
Yeah.
And so during our last book club, we just went through Meno.
Yeah.
And dissecting that and understanding the back and forth. So Meno, the idea behind it is Socrates is having a conversation with Meno asking, can virtue be taught? And so as we're going through this layer by layer, you really start to dissect things and wrestle around with these concepts of can it or can it not? And what you find is when you start looking and examining your own life, those things can become very uncomfortable really quickly.
Yeah.
And what does it mean if you do think a certain way, and how are you applying it? Or if you're not, where are you dropping the leadership within yourself or your own family? And so those things become really difficult to wrestle with. And so sometimes it's easier just to opt out of asking these really difficult questions, right?
Yeah.
And you see it as you're going through Meno, where Meno comes to the edge of his learning and Socrates keeps pushing him. And that's kind of what it felt like in book club, where you kind of reach that point of thinking you had an answer to start with, and then the riddles start coming, and then you end up more confused. When you started, you felt really solid in what your answers are. And when you are thinking deeply, I think that's one of the side effects that happens is you get to a place of confusion, and then you're kind of like, why did I even start down this path?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very, very possible to have that be what happens. Thinking is, I don't want to say that it's a luxury. It's become a luxury. It shouldn't be. But that's what it's become, hasn't it? I think that it's become luxury because of, to your point, how busy we are kept, the rat race that we're told we have to be on, have to stay on, the distractions that are out there. That's all very, very real. And I also think that part of I had this line when I was officiating, and I thought about it more actually afterwards. And I think it was probably my favorite part because I think it's the part that I have to sit with the most myself. It was almost like I was talking to myself. And it was where I said that trust is more beautiful than control. That the best marriage is not one that is independence-centric, but is one that is mutually dependent. And I think that in some ways is where life actually ends up taking you. You start as this helpless baby, and then you gain some measure of control and independence, and then you really go through an independent portion of your life. And that's if things are going well, right? You have health and success, and your kids are good, and all the rest. But our son was leading a little study for us the other night, and really his kind of point, and the point of the book that he was going through for us, was there are no guarantees. And I think it's that realization for people is part of the reason why it hurts to think, is because there's a big question mark in life, which is if you lose your health, if you don't have money, if you don't have these things because they are not guaranteed, and you really come to the conclusion that you're not actually in as much control as you think that you are, that's a very unnerving place to be. And so it kind of leaves you thinking like, well, then what? Right? If I'm not really fully 100% in control of all things, yes, you have personal responsibility, but that comes down to your response and your choice in any given situation, not your power over the situation.
Right.
Right? And I think that's like with my tattoo, these guys are all about, David, Joseph, Daniel are all about these pillars of faith who were so strong. And then Job is, and there's no guarantees. So who will you be? And do you know your place? You know, that's a very striking thing to think. And I don't think we get there until either we're pressed. This is why people say they're like, oh, well, like poor people come to faith, or people who are really sick come to faith. Well, yeah, it's because they've lost control. They've come to the realization that we all will come to at some point, which is you're not in control.
Right.
Do you think there's wisdom in coming to this question sooner than later? And if so, why?
Yeah, because I think it provides context for your life. Right.
Okay.
You can live however you want to live, but having some sort of context is pre-deciding how you want to live it.
I love that.
Right. It is, you're holding yourself to account because there is there's a lens that you're looking through. And so it changes everything.
Yeah.
Right. So for example, I can have a bad day, but I get to choose to keep that attitude when you come through the door, or I choose to change it. And the context is, how do I want to remember this day? How do I want to remember this marriage? Do I want to give into everything that I feel and have no discipline over those things? Well, no, because enough days of that, our marriage is going to look a lot different.
Yeah.
Right? So the pre-deciding is the context of choosing who I'm going to be in any given situation, regardless of circumstances. Now, that's like a silly example, but it's something that we can relate to because every day you have to re-choose who you're going to show up as.
In fairness, you do that very, very well. I think that's it's apparent to me. And what's interesting is that I would say there's a point in time for both of us, very much so, where that was not the case. And the health of our relationships and business and everything else was a direct result of that. But you very much choose, especially with our kids and sleeping with babies and having them wake up however many times, and you'd still wake up in the morning and had such a good attitude. Whereas I think to myself, like, I wouldn't be after day 2, and you very much have that. It's a commitment.
Well, and vice versa, right? You are driving 2 hours round trip because we do not live in the city that you practice in. That's a 2-hour, like on top of your days and schedule at Vita, you have to decide who you're going to be when you walk in that door. And so that looks very different when you have the context of, I am deciding that I'm going to show up for my marriage this way, regardless of circumstances or driving or traffic or patience or whatever it is. This is what I'm committing to. So you train yourself to become somebody different because you are holding yourself to a different bar, because you know you're going to be accountable for your actions.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually think that is a very big fork of the road. If you believe that you'll be held accountable for your actions in this life, I think you live very differently than somebody who thinks it doesn't really matter. Regardless of where it ends, I think that's a pretty crucial deciding factor for people. Because if there isn't anything afterwards, then kind of get yours. Take care of you, get yours in this life. It's a bit of a fork in the road. Do you agree?
I don't know if I do agree, because we've talked about that. I mean, from a Christian standpoint, we have forgiveness. So you could argue that you can live however you want and then just cash in that ticket right at the end, right? So
there's plenty of reasons why that's not true. But yes.
But what I'm saying is that is
a person could abuse the truth.
You
by
could,
that
you could,
way,
right?
yes.
You could. So, but the reason why I'm making that point is because it depends on the lens that you're looking through things, and if you're trying to negotiate your way into or out of certain things, which we all do because we're human and that's what we do, right? We try and look for rationalizations and different angles and how can I pivot this a different way? And
yeah, we do.
Right. And so that's something that we always have to take into account, is how much we lie to ourselves, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Self-deception is
Right.
huge. Well, it's actually in many ways what we've been talking about kind of comes down to that point, because it's who you're going to be when no one's looking.
Right.
That's really what you're asking. And because the rebuttal to that is actually very clear. It's, should you sin? Should you do whatever it is that you want, such that it abounds, like whatever you're doing just continues to grow? And the answer is de ninguna manera. By no means. Absolutely not, right? Because of love. Love it conquers that. It supersedes that. It's like, can I be whoever I want because you are a very committed, loyal, forgiving wife?
Right.
I could, and I could abuse that. But if I really do love you and I really do serve you as your husband. I would never want to do that.
Right.
Will I need it? Yes. Do I want it? No. I think that's a very critical thing in all this. And we are talking about, like, where do you want to live? Like, what do you want to do for your life? Who's the person that you want to be in your relationships and as you lead? That comes down to the pillar of what it is that you want to become. And in the end, you have to go first. You have to be willing to be that kind of person that when everyone else is either talking back at you or doesn't believe in you or doesn't support you or doesn't follow you, you're still going to be that person. If you enjoyed this episode of the Dental and Mental Podcast and this topic resonated with you, we go so much deeper inside the Thrive Lab.
So if you too want to be copied but not replicated, come join us in the lab.
And just for you, because you listen to the podcast, if you want a full $1,200 off of the year-long subscription, just use coupon code podcast. See you then. We end here. And I think people can answer these questions in order, but there's also a part of me that says that this is a good place to start because it's uncomfortable. And I think it's so important to go to the place that's most uncomfortable, because once you get relief there or you get some concrete piece, you can build from there. And I think that you have been really instrumental in my life on this front. Marriage is that, right? It's a mirror. It shows you all your flaws and imperfections and everything else. And you either choose to look at it or you choose not to. And I would prefer to look at it. I would prefer to see those things, as painful as it is. Which means I have to take time to myself to think through this stuff. When there's a lot of noise, it's very difficult to know what I think and what I believe. So talk a little bit about that, because we've found that I think that's why people we've worked with who have had success in these different areas, we've gotten them, we've helped them, and they've helped themselves get to a place where they're financially much, they're not chasing the dollar anymore, as it were, right? And they have way more time, and they have all this. And then there's that quiet that comes there. And it's such an unnerving quiet and calm that doesn't feel good. But it's such a good place to be still in. I have the advantage of driving 2 hours a day. And like you said, I could look at that and say that sucks. And there's times that I don't enjoy it, but I get a lot of time to think. And most of the time I actually drive up in silence. I don't listen to music. I don't listen to podcasts. I don't listen to anything. I will just sit there and think, or I'll pray, or I'll meditate on whatever it is I think I've got to work through. How valuable is free time and making it, synthesizing it in your life so that you can work on these kinds of problems? And how would you suggest doing it?
Well, I think it stops. I think it stops you from chasing inappropriate things. I think it really helps curb shiny object syndrome, because when you're looking to other people outside, right, social media, people in your life, opinions of others, whatever the case may be, what the team wants to do with the practice, you're not allowed to actually let what's internal come out. So you're just looking for whatever is external. I'll do that thing, or I'll do that thing. And removing all of that and sitting with yourself, you can actually start to allow answers to come through instead of chasing them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot of power that comes from that in being able to trust yourself. You start to operate differently because it's a solid foundation of, no, I know that this is true, and this is right, and this is accurate for me, even if no one else can see it. So you move differently because you're taking a different directive.
I really like that.
And and this is how people, I think, avoid trends, because they start to create and get ideas from within.
As a trend set versus following trends.
Right. And that's how you start to navigate your business in a different way and do things that are off the beaten path, because you start to get internal directive of this is the way to go. And when you start operating by that, it feels a little bit crazy. It feels a little bit reckless, especially when there's so much preparation that goes into everything else. I think when you really quiet down and learn to trust yourself, you're like, that is a good idea, but is that crazy? I haven't seen it done before. I don't know anybody that's doing it that way. Can I do it this way? Is that, and then you start looking externally, right? Like, can I do it? Has it been done? Maybe no. So maybe I shouldn't. And we can play those games with ourselves.
Yeah.
But once you start to learn how to trust it, everything else you start to look at as just nonsensical. You look at it as entertainment, not signs and guidance.
Yeah. You're making me remember, which actually we should probably do a podcast on together, about 5 or 6 years ago, I did a little talk on cerebral spinal fluid. And how we know so little about it, but how fascinating it actually might be. And my kind of pet theory that I think it's attached very much so to internal guidance and creativity and original thought. And to your point, the more distracted we are, you're not in alignment with those things. You actually become far more a carbon copy of the environment around you, the more noise there is, rather than an originator of thoughts. And it's not that anything is necessarily original. We essentially just recompile things. But there's ways of doing it which no one has done before. And then there's ways where you just are literally spitting out what everyone else has already done. You're just regurgitating what is around you. As visionaries of your practice, as leaders of their practice, leaders of their life, you may not even own a practice, but if you are the kind of person who is self-motivated, who takes personal responsibility, I think this question is a question you should be asking yourself very consistently and should start now if you're not already doing so. Find that time, because as a visionary, this is the vision. This is why you do what you do. You start with the why. Where are you going? Who are you doing it for?
Yeah, I think there are two ways that you could go about it. You can ask the question now and set up a context for your life that is very powerful and provides structure. And so you know everything that you're doing is intentional. Or you can live however you want and get to the end of it and then look through it to be able to extract meaning from it. So you're just trying to make sense of all of it so you can get the lesson, because you don't want to feel like it was for nothing. I think you could do it either way, and there are probably other ways that you could do it.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I don't prefer to just see how it turned out and then hope that I made some sense out of it at the end. It just doesn't feel like it would give vibrancy to my day-to-day life.
Well, and you mentioned the word accuracy earlier. I think it has a lot to do with accurate actions. To kind of wrap this up, I think that there's something to be said for when you understand some of these words are used, maybe overused, but the purpose or drive or mission behind what it is that you're trying to do in life. And maybe not even you have to have this crystal clear, this is my purpose on the planet, but an intention for the way you're trying to live your life. It very much it puts a lens on the way that you make decisions. Mm-hmm. When I was doing this, I had a very different design originally. I knew the thought that I wanted, which was very helpful, but I had a very different design. And that was what June said. He's like, that's a what. And then there's the how, and then there's the why. And we've got to start here. We got to start at the why, because if I don't really if it's not crystal clear why we're doing this and what the belief is behind it, we can't do the how or the what. It will never crystallize in the way that you want, and it'll feel inaccurate.
Can you just say what will June just put anything on your body? Is he a tattoo artist that you could be like,
Is he a sticker artist?
Well, not even that. He's clearly talented, but could I go and I'd be like, I want a pyramid, right? I want the Pyramid of Giza.
Yeah.
Will he do it?
He certainly won't do it right then and there. No, he has a very unique process, and I think here's the thing. Tattoos, by and large, are forever. Unless you want to go through the very painful laser therapy to get it off, right? Oh my
gosh, I watched that on social. That is gnarly.
I was telling Davina about how, D-Rock, about how they used to do it in juvie. And they would just they'd be actually, the juvie kids would like to go to the dentist because it was so painful to have their ink removed.
Yeah, they're probably using old tech, right? Yeah, probably not spa tech.
No. There was no spa there. Yeah, just cinder blocks. No, he won't. He won't, because he's very cognizant of this is forever. It should be forever. And you need to be very intentional about how you're going to do it. Well, Jordan Peterson says this, and I actually think that it's a very accurate point no matter what you think about him. He says that life is a very interesting and very unique game because by nature of what it is, you're all in. It's not a game that you can say like, I'm going to play halfway. I don't think I really want to go all chips in. He's like, it's all chips in. It's death is how you get out of it. It is the only game that you're all in from the outset. And I think that we don't treat it that way. I think we really do think that we have time, and it's that old Jack Kornfield / Buddha quote, right? Which is, the problem is you think you have time.
I like Jack Kornfield / Buddha. Did they collab?
Sure. They did a collab.
Link in bio if you want.
Link in bio. Come on now. I say that because everyone said it's Buddha, but it actually was Jack Kornfield. So depending upon where you come from.
We need a fact checker on this
I
one.
fact checked it.
Oh, okay.
That's why I know.
All right, gotcha.
It sounds way cooler to be like, yeah, Buddha said, but it actually wasn't. It was Jack Kornfield, which sounds like not a real person. It sounds like the actor who played, like, I don't know, the straw man and
The Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz. Yeah, we do. We think we have time. And as a result, we drag our feet on things that really matter. Life matters. How you do it matters. People, whether you think so or not, are watching at all times. Your kids are watching at all times. And being consistent and being a man or woman of integrity and leading yourself first, leading when it's not enjoyable to lead because most people think that they're leaders. We talked about this. Like, that's the part that sucks about leadership. All this that we've talked about is leadership, leading your own. But it's really fun to lead when everyone's like, where are we going next? Where are we going next, leader? Fearless leader. Let's go. I'm here to support you. That's not what you get. What you get are a bunch of people who are like, I think I could do it better.
Right. It was something I read on social media where it said, everybody wants a village. Nobody wants to be a villager.
That's so good.
Which is
so true.
Yeah, which is true. You even see it with our own kids, right? It's like Nico's supposed to be leading a conversation in our house, and we've got Kyra being like, I think I could do a better job than him. Let me have a crack at this.
Let me have a crack at this. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
and not realizing that there's a challenge in both and there's a beauty in both. We all are going to have moments of being leaders and all have moments of being followers, and you have to learn how to do both gracefully. And knowing when to follow is very difficult for most people. I don't think most people really understand that it's not weaker, right? It's actually a very honorable thing to be a good follower.
yeah, right.
Very honorable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, very, very good. This is fun. This is actually, you're very wise.
You are too. I love
enjoy
doing these
hearing
things. Well, I mean, how the podcast got started is we were having these conversations on our own. So we were like, might as well get a camera in here.
Right? Yeah, we're already talking.
Yeah, we're already doing this anyway, so might as well bring the people in.
Yeah. Well, we got a couple of fun podcasts coming down the pipe, but for now, hopefully, you guys enjoyed the 4-parter, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Thanks for being with us. Bye.
Thank you for listening and/or watching the Dental and Mental podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or any others for that matter, feel free to tap that subscribe button on YouTube, Apple, Amazon, as well as Spotify. While you're there, why not leave us a review, up to 5 stars? And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and leave us a comment. Let us know what topic you want us to discuss next.
If you like what you heard today and you want to be involved in the Thrive world from coaching to courses or just to connect with us, go to thethrivedentist.com.